So I'll ask Kash first, if I may. In your experience working with Shahidi Wamaji, what's your been a real practical insight that you've got into what works when it comes to improving accountability, where you've and why do you think that that was successful in that context?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon for those of you who are living in this part of the world. Maybe I'll do so by going through one of our many case studies in Tanzania. This is about pollution control. It's happening in the commercial city of Tanzania, which is Dar es Salaam. It has to do with industrial and municipal waste pollution into a major river that crosses across Dar es Salaam. And it has a very big impact on human and the environment, because then it's a big water source. As Nick was putting correctly, Tanzania has very good policies and almost all the registration in place. And we have multiple agencies that are government agencies, which are supposed to actually be responsible and accountable, ensuring that we have a safe. However, in this case study, we found out that despite us as Shahidi Wamaji providing education to citizens, the right holders, on their rights to claim for better services, but also to ensure that this is done. The authority persistently over many years did not comply with the existing legislation. They were still polluting the river, and ultimately the citizens or the right holder, they got frustrated and exhausted in terms of why should we be keeping on complaining to the authority when we know there are no answers to it. And their perception, authority come around, they do the inspection, they visit the industrial site, they come out, they possibly come out with brown envelope. So there was an issue of integrity. The other issue was also the issue of interference, power control, who owns the industries, and what is their interest in ensuring that the industry is not penalized. When you look at the legislation, they are very good. You can be penalized by heavy fines and including jail sentence, but also to close the industry. This one normally doesn't exist, It's very difficult. But we saw changes a couple of 3-4 years ago under this new government, when they began to take action and fining, penalizing, making sure the industries and service providers are following the law. And that was a good, because they also had to work with our community that we empowered. Apparently then, after some time, when the new administrator who was enforcing decided to relax, the environmental agencies began to also relax. We continued to see pollution going into the river. So there are a number of issues here. Some of them has to do with internal issues related to the agencies, but others are external. Some of the internal one has to do with the capacity to address issues of pollution. One of the key one is the financing. There's a big gap in financing. But the other one has to do with what I said about political interference. If authority want to take action, they are told, wait until tomorrow, we'll see what to do. And it never happens. And other agencies like media, which in a way, they are supposed to be reporting such, dangerous event, but they don't. They normally only report when there's a death and loss of property. And then nothing happens. But you know, when this government took action, some of these agencies began to be accountable and responsible. You could see them regular without being followed out by the minister or by the high politician. But there were issues related to the community also, which we feel, you know, this research program we may possibly address. The governance structure in Tanzania is very good. It begins at household level and goes all the way up to the national level, and provide an avenue for everyone to speak out. But we don't know why they don't want to speak out. We don't know why they don't want to represent the rest of the other people. And neither what motivation drives one individual to talk loudly and the other not to do the same, so that they can take a corrective action. Of course, we feel like champions. If champion exists in the community, then it takes a good direction. We have had a few champions, but champions also need motivation. And nowadays, volunteering has become a very difficult issue. Maybe I leave it to Malesi there, but we know there are big gaps in terms of understanding what works. We know some answers, but not every answer is the same as another event. Malesi, would you want to take from this one, and then I can come and talk about the role of duty bearers?
Sure. I think I would agree with you that sometimes it goes beyond the enabling environment. And giving the example of Kenya, I think we have a very strong enabling environment, starting all the way from the constitution, specific legislation in place that directly speaks to issues of accountability and sets the threshold for public officials to adhere to high levels of accountability. But often we find that there are certain triggers that are required to ensure that this enabling framework that is in place is then achieved. I mean, it achieves the aspirations and intents that it has set out to achieve. I think it is very important to really involve communities when we are talking about accountability. And this goes beyond just the training, because training is important. It provides the information, it provides them the overall content of what are the requirements, expectations, and what should be their roles. But for effective accountability in our experience, we have to make sure that the communities then take that leadership in putting duty bearers to task, and to a large extent approaching it from the perspective of the claim for their rights. And in many instances, we find that that works best when there is that interaction from a rights-based perspective. We've seen also the challenge of these conflicts that Nick spoke about earlier, about institutional arrangements and either real or perceived conflicts of mandate, where I find, like the example my senior engineer Herbert has spoken about, of pollution control, you might find that there are one or two agencies that are involved directly. So when you have more than one institution responsible for accountability over the same issue, oftentimes what happens is that none of them takes responsibility, none of them is responsible for accountability, either because they expect the other institution to play its role, or that citizens are just uncertain about who to approach between the two or more institutions. So where we have institutional arrangements that are clear to the institutional duty bearers and also to the right holders, then we find that there is a higher degree of accountability, and the system works a little bit better. I think that's what I would add for the time being.
Thank you very much, Malesi. If I can pick up, I think there's a question here in the question and answer from Arthur Mbabazi, saying, and coming back to you, Kash, but on a similar point, in scenarios, the question is, in scenarios of no medical activisms and political interference, what's been the contribution or role of CSOs about the pollution issue? So when we have these either conflicting mandates or difficulties of getting action, where does CSOs best come in? And or conversely, where have you found challenges with getting effective role for CSOs? Did you catch me there, Kash?
Yes, I got it correctly.
Okay.
Civil society has got two roles here. One of them is to empower the citizens or the right holders with the right information and education so that they can take their own action. And in our experience, we empower citizens, but quite often they feel like we should take a step forward by us being part of them, which basically in our model, we felt like someone may ask you, so are you the one who has impact of pollution? Why do you have to stand on behalf of them? So this is one of our experience, and we're trying to find answers. What makes some of this group of citizens much more responsive and to be able to take action through their own leadership, and the rest just keep behind and get uneasy to take action because of the social political arrangement within the area. But the second role that civil society will play is to engage with the duty bearers and to try and understand, what are the constraints or obstacles that make them not be accountable. So issues about financing, we are done our financing. We saw, however, this regulator is in place, but then they cannot do anything because they are underfunded. And then we take a next step to actually engage with the higher authority, who are the financer, like the treasurer, the minister, and the like. I think this is what we normally do. So we engage at that lower level, micro level, and the macro level to be able to provide leverage to get to the answers and the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. I misspoke in the question, so I'm going to pass the second part over to Malesi if I can. Where is there a role for media in these challenges? Have you had any experience either trying to use media to improve accountability, or noticing that the media, a lack of media activism has slowed down or prevented progress in that area? That was Arthur's question.
Yeah, I did. I think media has a very important and strategic role, and I dare say maybe even a bigger role than civil society, in the sense that the scope and ability of civil society to engage the public is much more limited compared to that of media. Media has a bigger outreach, it has a larger level of persuasion, and many people depend on media for primary information and decision making. However, we've not seen media engaging quite effectively, and most of the time when they engage on issues to do with accountability, it tends to be sporadic. So one time they do this, and then next time they don't follow it up and really generate a strong conversation that lasts for a long time. I'll give an example of here in Kenya, where one of the media stations last year, while we stick on the subject of pollution, ran a series, a documentary series on essentially on pollution, talking about the Poison River and demonstrating how through the river channel there's been pollution and how people continue to use this. And there was a huge outcry, and we immediately saw the regulator, the authority in charge of environmental regulation, now swinging into action and taking corrective action in some cases, arresting a number of people, etc. That just shows you the power, because once media puts it out there, the kind of conversation that starts is really big compared to even civil society. Civil society largely depends on media for broadcast of or expanding the reach of its messages. So in my opinion, I think there is a huge potential for the use of media in social accountability. And even within this program, we should really try to see how to tap much more of that. Thank you.
Maybe, Tim, can I come on the media issue? Our experience has shown that reporting on issues of the environment and water resources is not exciting, and it does not sell for media companies. And for them, the good news is news that has disaster, sex, sports, and politics. So this is the area where we are trying to find how to excite them and motivate to write issues on development and that target mankind. But we have challenges because of his registration in countries where actually they ensure that there's high costs of taxes, and media was to survive. So in order to survive, they had to find good news that attract audience and they can pay for it. So we have a bit of those challenges using media, particularly like one in Tanzania. I'm not sure other countries has the same problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have just time, I think, for one more comment. I've got one directed to you, Malesi, which reads, how have the NRM governance tensions between the national and county governments affected the management and conservation of water sources? Is that an area you can discuss? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think this is specific to the arrangement of government in Kenya. The question speaks about the tensions between the natural resource management roles of the national government vis-a-vis those of the devolved government. And indeed, there have been quite a number of tensions, either because of the interpretation of the schedules of the constitution in terms of whose role it is to do what. Two, because of, or either because of just a conflict, an actual conflict in roles, just as we spoke about the institutional roles. This is a matter that has taken quite a bit of time to try to deal with in Kenya, and it affects even the whole spectrum of accountability, because even for those actors who would want to raise issues, ask questions, follow up on accountability, sometimes it's very unclear who takes that responsibility. Who do you engage between the national and the devolved government? And in most cases, the national government looks to be far away now in the current context, because most of the service-based engagements are at the local level, but then the resource management are largely a national issue. So in the context of these conflicts, I think the issues of accountability have been compromised because of what I've just spoken about. And there are ongoing efforts to try and build consensus on that through the intergovernmental relations process. And civil society is continually trying to follow up to provide support on this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had a fair few more questions come in on the Q&A.